I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on non-coronavirus related vacation. And Andrew Kuo, despite coronavirus, takes no days off.
Getting hyped for St. Patrick's Day, man. It's going to be the best one ever. What are you going to wear, man?
Oh, man. Me and the lads are going to get our little leprechaun ensembles together. We're going to scream about Jason Tatum. We're going to have some Sam Adams winter lagers, and we are going apeshit.
Nice, man. I got my corned beef cooking. I got my sauerkraut krauting. I got my bagpipes piping.
Sauerkraut? Now I think you're mixing
it's German.
your Euros up. That's a classic Knicks fan move. You just boo any tall Euro that comes in front of you.
All those underdeveloped countries are the same to me.
But seriously, St. Patrick's Day is going to be a rager this season.
It's going to be crazy. We're going to start at McSorley's. We're going to take it to Mix something else's. And we're going to talk about how Ben Simmons just doesn't want it enough. Man.
Oh, man. I cannot wait to get to Dublin Mick O'Houlihan's.
This is America, and I do what I want, Ben.
It was really disturbing, maybe that's the right word, to see young people covered in green, shamrocks all over the place. A lot of Celtics jerseys, Celtics jerseys, no lie.
Yep.
Clustering into really bad bars in tight proximity to each other in the age of coronavirus.
That's wild. Nothing can stop the green wave. When kids want to party, they want to party. But, before getting super annoyed at them, I'm like, I get it. Kids do dumb things, and we haven't had any leadership tell us anything real.
I'm not actually annoyed at them. I am marveling at their reckless stupidity. I'm not angry at them because, as you said, we have not gotten great instructions. We have the President of the United States saying this is a hoax. Yeah. So if a moron from Sigtau wants to go do shots of Jameson at 8 o'clock in the morning, like, how are we mad at that guy? We can make fun of him and we can call him a moron, but like, he's not necessarily the villain here.
No, I mean, demonizing young people for being young for exactly what they are is boring. I think we need someone to tell us something, man. Like, where are these millions of tests that we were promised on Friday? It's like nothing's happening.
At the same time, I will say, when people are exclaiming, I have to live my life. Okay, but what exactly were we talking about here? You have to live your life? You mean you can't take a couple days off from the bar? That was my only objection to the moronic young people who were clustered into spots to, binge drink. It's like, what are we really talking about? That you couldn't get just annihilated off of whiskey sours on Saturday night? Like, I got to live my life, man. I'm not going to let this disease hold me captive. Yeah. I got to get trashed real quick.
Well, it's like the
dance to a Bubba Sparks song.
Bubba Sparks.
Booty, 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 booty.
That's my jam. I'll be right back. Catch me on the dance floor. Well, it's like the head of a certain media company from the Beantown went online, and I think he had a little video that went viral, and he was like, I believe in this self-distancing. I believe in quarantine. But if I see other fellow young people in their 40s out at brunch, I'm going out. And I'm like, that is a logical way to think. But I just wish maybe this is social networking at its best, though. When something like that happens, we shame them into we shame people into behaving maybe differently. And my whole life is about peer pressure. I just do, I wear what I wear, I think what I think because of the people around me.
To that end, Last episode, which was 3 days ago.
It was a heater. It's a banger. It was a perfect pod.
Yeah, 3 perfect pods in a row. A lot of people said it couldn't be done, and yet there it is.
Rings, baby.
But yes, that episode was entitled Little Quarantine. And at the end of it, we described what we felt was an adequate solution to cabin fever and trying to help our friends in the service industry, which was be careful, don't go to mass gatherings, but maybe have a burger and a beer at a place you like. That is not an option anymore, at least in New York City. Mm-hmm. And perhaps that's for the best because it was going to be abused. In my mind, there was this sort of judicious use of that, like go in there, sit apart from people, eat a burger, have a beer, go home. It was not meant to be, because this weekend in New York City, it was nice weather. I walked by hordes of people packed into restaurants for brunch, drinking outside. People did not adjust their lifestyle at all. And maybe as a result of that, we now have a new dictum here in New York City, which is basically everything is closed.
All the fun things like restaurants, not gyms. Gyms aren't fun, but those are closed. And bars and clubs and movie theaters. Yeah, all the good stuff. I believe you could still get groceries.
Yeah. Regular stores are open.
Yeah. But not the fun stuff where people gather and stay. And it's smart. It's optically really jarring, but it's smart because we just have to do this now. Lose now, laugh later. The Knicks should heed these calls.
Just walking around this morning, going out to get my typical first cup of coffee, which someone on Twitter had dubbed the Redaelli, which I think is a nice idea. That's your first cup of coffee, the Redaelli.
How many cups of coffee do you have a day?
Maybe like 2. I'm not a big coffee drinker anyway. But the first one, the Redaelli. And I went over to the spot that I've been going to, and they've been adjusting the way that they serve. There's no longer a place for you to pour your own milk or add sugar or put a top on it. They all do that behind the counter now. And I went over this morning and they were closed. And I felt like really sad. I was like, that's where I've been going every day. The fact that it had remained open and I felt good about my patronage, and I walked by at 9 in the morning or whatever it was, 8:45, and they were shuttered, and I was just like, shit.
Yeah.
Shit, this is how it is, huh?
Yeah. I got to thinking about like what makes. I mean, this is a little wistful, but not quite. It's like what? Apologies. It's a tough time, Ben. What makes New York City, and what makes your life a life, and what makes, if you go to Portugal or Taiwan or Mexico City, all the places we love to visit, what makes those places awesome? And I always think about like food and things to do, like dance to music or see a band. I don't think about movies when I think about traveling. I don't think about infrastructure. I think about the things you can experience. And once you take those things away from us, life doesn't really resemble life anymore. And I'm like, am I just like a filthy consumer that needs to like constantly buy food and buy things and buy experiences? I'm like, well, I guess that's just what life is.
You're 100% right. And I rarely would acknowledge that.
Is Klay Thompson good?
On this subject, you are correct.
I'll take it.
But it's true. When I conjure up my favorite memories of traveling to unfamiliar cities that you are familiarizing yourself with, it's always food and drinks and the cultural fabric of a city and a society, a nation, a community are based around those things because they're gathering points. Mm-hmm. To your exact point, when I think of places like Portugal or Mexico City or Paris, I think of parties I've been at, or my favorite restaurants, or my favorite bar, or a great meal that I had, or someone's house where we all were hanging out. And it's not about walking into an empty store and purchasing something.
It's not about responsibility or like, the everything needs to be propped up by an infrastructure, but your experience, your visceral experience is like, oh, this is my favorite slice. This is where I go get my coffee. This is where I see all my favorite bands. This is where I see my friends and have a beer. To have those go away is like, we need to be steady because it could be really surreal.
And let's be honest, we're talking about New York, which is a cultural epicenter, but not necessarily an epicenter for other things. It's not a beautiful place
right.
with beaches or hiking trails or mountains or natural splendor. Right. So when you take away our restaurants and our bars and our people, we're Detroit. Like, no disrespect to Detroit. I just mean, we're Rochester, we're Salt Lake City. Like, what? Maybe not even, because they actually have natural splendor. Like, what do we even have here?
Milwaukee's got a beach, man. People surf in Milwaukee.
I mean, we don't have great weather. We don't have, I don't know, rolling hills.
We have no places. Yeah, we can't stand on a pier on the west side and take life in. It's just a bunch of smelly water.
Right. I mean, we deal with the compactness of our living spaces and our neighborhoods because of the social component of living in New York City, which is at this point been completely siphoned out of that existence.
Yeah. I mean, it's driven by Wall Street kind of and culture. And when the Met is shut down and Wall Street is tanking, I'm like, what's the upside, man?
No, exactly. We're not getting any of the perks, man.
Yeah.
But at least we have small apartments. Shout out to that.
Yeah.
Easier to keep clean.
Yeah. Shout out to my 75 square foot kitchen. It's tight, literally. Everyone have you been getting these texts from people who are like, let's have a hang session on Zoom or FaceTime, or I was thinking about, we have a few threads running with a bunch of our buddies, but one of them I was considering just popping a White Claw and seeing who was around, seeing if you were around. I know you guys are around. You guys are ducking my FaceTimes, but just seeing who wants to share half a claw with me before I go to sleep, Talk some shit about the Lakers. I don't know.
This is all very unfamiliar territory in terms of how do we deal with profound isolation when it's not by choice.
Yeah.
Because the millennial cliche of I'm an introvert.
Oh.
I love being an introvert.
Yeah,
it's but this is the difference between being an incel and a vol cell.
Shout out to the vol cells. I mean, a QAnon. Is there a QAnon joke in here? Quarantine.
Sure.
Yeah, let's do it. We did it. Cool. But
nailed that one.
But this, how they say the numbers of this virus are just going to get worse before they get better, and it's predictable in that way. And on TV we hear the phrase, "It's going to get worse before it gets better," and I really worry about our collective psyche. It's just this kind of brain space is going to get worse before it gets better too. It's not that smooth.
We're like a day in.
Yeah, exactly.
And people are like, I'm losing it.
Yeah, totally. I'm like, stay focused. I mean, I don't know. You do it. We're lucky enough to have this pod and to be able to communicate this way. And people have cell phones and FaceTimes and all that stuff. But this is going to get real challenging real soon, I think.
I do wonder what the stomach for this is. Because at least at this point, there is the perception that coronavirus is not that big of a deal if you're young and you get it. And so far that has been borne out by the results in other places. And if you are 25 years old, 30 years old, you don't have a fear of getting this. So after 2 weeks in your apartment, bored silly, we may be facing a real rebellion against quarantine. And to be clear, even 2 weeks without this disease spiking is a big deal and really helpful. But I am very much concerned that will be impossible to corral young people who do not fear this disease in the way that it seems necessary, or at least scientists are recommending.
Yeah, and that's
It's
why
different than if like you went out and you got bitten by a zombie, you become one.
Right,
This is like you go out and you get it, you'll feel sick for a couple days, and then you might be immune to it. Yeah. It's like, all right, well, I get it, the flattening thing, but I'm not scared of the disease.
Right, and the flattening thing is such a hard to observe thing, especially when we're not getting any information from the government at all, zero, that we're closer to Italy than we are to China, a country that politicians were calling underdeveloped, but they squashed this thing. And that's a different culture there. It's a different government, South Korea as well, but they really handled it. They botched it and then handled it. And we are closer to Italy, who had over 300 deaths yesterday. That's a lot. That's too many, man.
It's true. So let's leave the doom and gloom aside for a little bit, though. Let's talk about our new lives. Because now that we can't go out to eat by law, you can still order delivery, and I believe that's something that
I'm gonna try that today.
a lot of people are going to have to take advantage of.
Yeah.
But one thing we've noticed, and I'm talking specifically about our fantasy basketball group thread, is everyone's just talking about cooking now.
The Latrell Sprewell Invitational thread?
That's the one. Where people want to talk about cooking, what they're making, and you see a lot of discussion of it on social media as well. We are now entering an age where, like, if you can't cook, you are at a real social disadvantage right now.
I know. And to give some framing, this thread has a couple of chefs and restaurant owners involved who are very into food. And there's like an Asian alliance component where we kind of like talk about food amongst you guys. Mm-hmm. But this really brings it out of us, man. We've been cooking up a storm, all of us. What have you been cooking?
Last night I had dried fava beans, soaked them, peeled them, boiled them up with some potatoes and onion, and then
Did you have some
sauteed
liver?
some broccoli rabe with garlic and Aleppo pepper.
A nice glass of Chianti.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice. A Apulian treat. What else? New York Times recipe for like a chicken that you make in sort of the mustard sauce. It was quite good.
Sounds very
I think
French.
it was one of their virally recipes from last year, I think. Some shakshukas.
What's a
some
shakshuka? Is it
it's
a
like a
dominant
pet.
big?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
It's basically a tomato pepper base, and then you cook eggs on top, and then you add like feta cheese or lebne or parsley on top.
Sounds
it's quite good.
delicious.
Yes, it is delicious.
Your cooking style is so different than my cooking style. It's so odd.
Wow, what do you got? What do you got going over in the quotient?
Well, I don't mean to shift it. All I'm saying is I don't know how to cook any of these things that you mentioned, and I consider myself okay in the kitchen. Like I can keep a house alive, but all these things that you're talking about, I'm like, what's that? What's that about? What do you mean?
I made some chickpea pancakes with
what the
pickled
hell?
mango yogurt.
What the hell? Like I've never eaten that in my life.
Yeah, well.
What is that about? Is it like a hummus kind of batter?
They taste kind of like regular pancakes. It's flour made of chickpeas.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Chickpea flour. Wow. So you just like want some chickpea pancakes? Like you're in your kitchen. You're like there's a pandemic happening. I think an alternative to normal pancakes is the calling for me now.
Look, I took inventory of what was in my cabinets.
Right.
There was chickpea flour. I decided chickpea flour with a little bit of baking powder, a little salt, some water. You got yourself some pancakes.
It's interesting. You're a dry guy. I've been shopping, food shopping with you many times, and you are drawn to many dried things, dry boys.
Dry boys.
Is it like because did your mom have this style of cooking? Was she really into beans and chickpeas and all this stuff that like pantry foods and stuff?
I was raised in a bunker.
This is what I'm getting to. You're a pandemic a veteran.
All right, so what have you made since we're boasting about our creations?
Well, I have a market next to me, luckily, many markets. So I've been trying to eat green things as much as I can for the last few years. But what did we make last night? Yo, a head of cabbage goes so far. It's wild. I mean, it's super big, super heavy, very affordable, and it lasts you like a week and a half of just like straight up eating that cabbage. It's wild. It's like the food that keeps on giving. But I've been
Ed Eberle's giving cabbage.
Yeah, I just fry that up with some this thing called soy sauce, Ben. It's like a delicious fermented soybean extract. Okay.
It was really good with sriracha. Have you heard about that?
Is it like
The
Chinese
grill master,
ketchup?
the grill master's favorite?
Yo, are you asking for my top 10 sriracha ranking right now? Okay, Jason Tatum 1, Jaylen Brown 2. But so maybe like 4 months ago, I was super bored of cooking, and I needed a way out. And I found, those spicy peppers that look like witches' noses in the supermarket. They're not jalapenos; they're long peppers, I believe they're called.
Yes.
But they saved everything for me. I consume those like it was my job. So I slice them on everything I make: Asian, Italian, American. It saved me. So whatever.
Well, here's my question. There are certainly listeners of ours who are marveling at our expertise in the kitchen right now. They are impressed beyond words.
Wow.
Just stunned and in shock and awe simultaneously. How do you recommend that someone who has no functional cooking skills, like women I have dated in the past,
it's not cool, man.
how would you recommend someone get into cooking if they have not done it in the past? How would you start?
I don't think everyone should have to have this skill, but I would start with just finding out what you like to eat because nothing sucks more than struggling to make something you kind of don't even want to eat. Like if you told me to make chickpea pancakes, I'd be like, challenge accepted. And when they were done, I'm like, I don't really want this. There's no soy sauce on this, man. There's no lo mein anywhere.
Okay. Make this advice more helpful.
Cook what you want to eat. Start simple, start basic, and start cheap. So you're not invested in ingredients that you maybe like. Fish is really tough because it's expensive and really delicate. So don't start with fish. Start with something simple. Like you can make so many amazing things as boiling a pot of water. I think that's the first thing to do, and you accelerate from there. But I was addicted to, one of my favorite things to do as a kid was hang out with my mom in her kitchen. So I learned everything from just watching her, and she made me do stuff, obviously, like peel garlic and chop vegetables and learn how to use a knife. I really enjoyed all that stuff. And I always say, like, in my studio when I work on painting, it's more like cooking than painting is like cooking, because it's all prep kind of, and the execution is kind of a different thing entirely. And I would start simple. Start with something you like to eat and do it affordably and easily, and then move on from there.
So I think you hit on one of the main points I was going to make, which is that the daunting elements of cooking, which I recall from years ago when I did not have any experience in that realm, was the time that it takes to do stuff, and looking at a recipe and not having things.
Yeah, money is important here.
Because if you look at a recipe where it uses 7 different spices, and you're like, well, I have some onion powder.
Right.
And I don't have any of these. And if I go and buy them, that's going to cost me $50. And I'm just trying to make, and 5 different kinds of spices.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and buy a thing
Go
of,
off, Spice King.
drop that spice, word to NBA desktop. But the idea is that I think the 2 most important parts are finding simple recipes that don't require you to purchase a lot of different spices that you may not use again for 6 months. I think that's crucial. And you mentioned specifically the other one, which is knife skills. I would really recommend starting with things like soup, where you have to chop up a bunch of celery, or you have to chop up a bunch of carrots and learn how to cut an onion correctly. And go on YouTube. There's knife tutorials all over the place. If you learn how to chop and you learn how to use a knife capably, it cuts the time required to make things exponentially. All of a sudden, what used to take you 15 minutes to do prep, as you described, now takes you 4. It is a huge difference. So that's what I would say is learn to use a knife capably and get yourself a nice, sharp butcher's knife. You can get a cheap one with a plastic handle. You need a butcher's knife. Don't use a serrated one. Don't use a small one. Just get a regular ass, like whatever they are, 9-inch, 8-inch chef's knife. And you can get them for like $15.
Yeah. And
learn how to cut.
You made a good point too. There's certain dishes like soups and pastas that are more forgiving than like a nice steak or a nice piece of fish. You could ruin a steak depending on how you like it really easily. It's really hard to ruin soup. You can like mess up a few steps and save it pretty easily because the time it takes to cook is longer, so there's more error involved.
Start with something like lentil soup, like a Mexican bean soup. Those are things, a few fresh herbs, celery, onions, carrots, a dried bean, which you know I love.
Wow, dry boy.
Some sort of ancient grain.
How ancient? Tell me how ancient.
Each more ancient than the last.
One of my buddies for one of his projects is every time he visits a town, sometimes he'll have a bean party. He just collects old beans from around his travels. And so he'll make like I forget the number, but it's something like a 40 bean chili. And he was like, oh yeah, these beans are from all over the world. So I just cooked them up tonight. It's kind of a cool thing to do. I don't love beans, but
I like that idea.
It's nice. It's like, I mean, I think it's a really charming idea, but I'm not a bean guy, man. I think they're the opposite of flavor. They're mealy and they take too much boosting by herbs and spices.
I feel your complaint there, but I do think if we're talking about cooking at home, cooking simply with things that you can keep in your pantry, garbanzo beans, cannellini beans, black beans, they are your friends.
I actually bought a bunch just in case.
And look, the worm turns.
Yeah, they'll be there for years, I think. I'm a big fan of canned small fishes, but I have cats, so I can't eat those canned fishes anymore unless I want to deal with 20 minutes of whining. Life's tough over here, man.
I can tell.
But yeah, cooking is a great way to just do something too, right? Like we can watch movies. I've watched all the Netflix stuff. I watch all Hulu, Amazon. Like it's nice to actually sit down and cook something. It takes time.
100%.
Nice.
I think especially for people in New York, the biggest impediment to learning how to cook is time. And it's because it takes a while to learn to cook. It takes a while to cut things. It takes a while to go to the store and get the ingredients. And by all that, you're like, I might as well just fucking order a pad thai.
Yeah. Well,
now you have time. Everyone has time. If you're going to learn to cook, this is a good moment.
Yeah.
But there are other things we can do at home. And you just mentioned how we are running through available options across your Hulus and Netflix and Amazons and Disney and whatever.
HBO, Showtime, Stars.
Yes.
I got it.
So, last night, HBO put out the premiere episode, season 3 of Westworld. opportune timing for HBO with a captive audience, including myself, who had sworn off this idiotic show well over a year ago, did not even engage with season 2. I didn't want to get roped back into this. I know how dumb it is. I know it.
It's like the Detroit Pistons. I'm watching Blake Griffin dunk again. Back his man down. So what'd you think?
It was exactly as confusing and dumb as I expected, and I'm in. I'm back in. They got me. Everything about it
got Pacino'd, man.
Everything about it sucked, but it looked kind of cool, and I'm back in.
Isn't that enough, though? If something can look cool,
it really
that's
is.
Enough.
It actually is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm no Westworld aficionado, but they kind of...
How is anybody, man? This show is nonsensical.
I love it. And the first 2 seasons were kind of brooding and minimal, and like everything was an allegory, and it was like so heavy-handed. And I flipped on this episode, the premiere last night of season 3. Super fun, man. It was like Paul Verhoeven, Total Recall. There's like elements of all these great sci-fi stories, like from Blade Runner, all these little bits put together.
Dude, Aaron Paul with the Blade Runner voiceover. Here we are with some cyberpunk new world. Committing crimes and robbing banks with apps. It was so dumb. It was so stupid.
Wait. Was he hacking the mainframe?
Oh my God. Just so.
But
the original Westworld, just to give people a little background.
The original, right?
I'm sorry, the HBO original, which was based on the original. It was, in case you don't know, which most people already do. But anyway, it was about robots who were mistreated and abused in an amusement park for adults, where they were raped and killed and wounded. Then, because they were robots, would live again, and it would happen to them over and over. They became self-aware and started a robot rebellion. So this is outside of that park. And it was always kind of ambiguous what world we were in back during the original Westworld, but now it is very cyberpunk. It's like 2056 or something. There are, of course, flying cars, more or less. And it's like every cliche of a futuristic movie that you could imagine. Like 2 of the first 5 scenes are people on roofs drinking champagne.
I love science fiction. It's one of the things that I find great comfort in. So sign me up. And I think the interesting thing with science fiction, this is kind of NBA related, is it was the vision of a handful of people that kind of became a genre of the way we think about the future. But it's just like a storytelling thing. And those few people would be like Ridley Scott, who did the first Blade Runner, and all those production design people, Isaac Asimov, all these people who kind of set the tone for what we still do. Horror movies the same way. We think of this genre as kind of like an elemental thing in movie making, but it's really the vision of a few people. And this vision is traditional. It's very traditional. It's, if you walked in to the Westworld season 3 episode 1 and I told you this was the Watchmen, you'd be like, okay, where are the Watchmen guys? Where are the capes? It's kind of the same vision, and I love it. I love those futuristic bikes. I love rollerblades. I love Angelina Jolie hacking the mainframe. I love phone booths that travel time. I just sign me up, man.
I loved how season 3 of Westworld immediately introduced a puzzle and a mystery that I will never understand or care about and will ultimately not mean anything. Like, there's this big computer or something, and they're like, who's behind this? And then no one will say. And I'm like, oh, here's the meaningless puzzle that we're supposed to care about. Yeah. Well done, Westworld. You've done it again. Yeah. And now where is the alternate timeline?
I think the idea of computers with feelings will never be old to me. I don't think that's going to get old forever. And I always think of people trying to, every time someone talks about cancer, not to talk about cancer, but everyone's like, fuck cancer, we can beat it. I'm like, well, cancer's not a thing. It's like, we could beat coronavirus, fuck coronavirus. I'm like, It's not a thing.
We are going to nuke the hell out of this coronavirus and send it back to where it came from.
Like this evil thing, I'm like, oh, it has no personality. And it's a virus that kind of reproduces and then dies or lives. But I think robots becoming self-aware is so interesting to me still. I loved Blade Runner 2, more Blade Runners. I thought that was one of the great movies ever made. And I know it got swallowed up in, I don't know, the way we consume movies now. And we pay attention to stuff like Parasite, but not the sequel to a sci-fi movie. That movie was incredible, man.
I enjoyed that.
It was,
It was
so
a great
good.
movie for a plane.
Oh,
It
come
was
on.
It was incredibly long and looked cool. I did not mind that movie. But Westworld, my biggest critique of the first season was that in a liberating way, one could argue, there were no stakes. You didn't care about any of the human characters. You never knew if someone was a human or a robot. Everyone who died just sort of came back to life in another form.
This is annoying. That's very annoying to me.
There were no stakes at all.
This is Game of Thrones shit. He's alive.
After missing the second season, I guess the robots are no longer immortal, but then they can regenerate and recreate. I don't know. Again, when I'm watching this, I have never felt as if anything mattered that happened. They just do things and then there's no ramifications and they just do them again. People just recreate themselves constantly. And that was always my critique. So I don't know if that has changed, but I did not get that feeling watching this that I cared at all about any of the characters or that any of them would actually ever die.
Right. My only demand from anything I watch is for something to be great is I want to care about any character. I don't care that nothing happens. Nothing can happen, but I still want to just feel something for some character. And you're meant to feel something for Ed Harris, but he's a scoundrel, so you don't like him. Also, was the first revolutionary painter to paint without the brush touching the canvas. And that was pretty amazing. And Jeffrey Wright, you're meant to care about him, and he combined graffiti.
But you don't care about him.
Well, he why not? He combined graffiti iconography with old school painting.
Okay, that's cool.
And became an international superstar in the art world. Like,
And he made the Dallas Mavericks uniforms.
That's right. The 15 elements of hip hop.
Designed
Number one.
the Brooklyn Nets Coogee uniforms as well.
But yeah, it's hard to care about any of these characters. Evan Rachel Wood is kind of, you can't really figure out what she wants.
But
And
also, she is supposed to be the moral center of this Westworld universe, and her vengeance is the driving force to this movie, but you also still don't care about it.
It's
When I say movie, I mean this entire series. I just misspoke.
So they introduced Aaron Paul. Is there another actor who has gotten more mileage from his scruffiness than him? Like, he is to me, he's like a Franco, but he has that scruff, so he's very brooding instead. But I don't believe his broodiness. So after I watched Westworld, I rewatched the Breaking Bad movie, El Camino, and he's very brooding in that as well. I'm like, yo, man, maybe he needs to expand his repertoire in the kitchen, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, I find him a tiresome and unappealing actor.
It's hard to care about him because the broodiness is just pointless, kind of.
He's also not an interesting broody character. You know, there are people who, like Philip Seymour Hoffman, he could have been brooding in every appearance and he would have been great because he is a phenomenal actor. Aaron Paul, not to diminish his chops, but it's just Aaron Paul sulking,
Yes.
frowning,
Yeah.
talking in a grizzled voice. Doesn't feel like there's an underlying gravity to him as an actor or person, because we know he's kind of just like a Hollywood dipshit.
I mean, you take the work where you can get it, right? And he might not have options to
Not
do
mad at
like
him.
a period piece or something.
Yeah, no, I'm not blaming him.
Yeah.
I'm just saying as a casting decision, I think you could have found someone more convincing and interesting than a guy we've just seen in this exact same role for his whole career.
Yeah, I agree. And there's certain actors who do the same thing. Like, I don't know, talking about Keanu Reeves is very tiresome, but like, at least he's funny. So it's interesting. Like, all I want from Aaron Paul is something else, just something. And when he shows up on a show, I really look forward to watching. I'm like, oh,
I'm
more
so
brood.
excited for Andrew Kuo's John Wick podcast. This is the perfect time for you to unveil
Okay.
all Keanu all the time.
Can we assign John Wick characters to NBA players? Go.
Wait. I've got some things about The Wire I want to talk about.
Can you frame it in a way I would understand through an NBA lens? Go.
Please, can we not do this conceit?
But I've been devouring everything on TV, man. I'm running out, and I'm rewatching stuff for the second and third times.
Okay. Which member of the Hawks is Prop Joe?
Who is better than Better Call Saul character on the Knicks?
Which Morai is Marlo Stansfield?
Is Nikola Jokic Tony Soprano?
I'm more interested in that. I'm down for Sopranos. Wire, I'm done with it. It's a great show.
Great show.
But I'm done with the Wire basketball analog. Sopranos, I have a little bit more tolerance for.
Is it because you like The Sopranos more?
I just think The Sopranos was less celebrated.
Was it?
Not at the time.
That's a great show. Like, really, really great show.
Oh, I think it is. I think it is properly celebrated now for sure.
Yeah.
But there was a nexus point between the Wire and basketball in really interesting, great ways early on that has become a trope.
Yeah. And shout out to people who made that trope because they're awesome at what they do. But wait, can we talk about like how the rankings of it? Because we always have like The Wire versus Soprano, which one's better, whatever. They're both great. How come no one talks about like not Breaking Bad, like Curb Your Enthusiasm as not in that tier? Because that show to me is almost as immaculate as those other two shows. Do we not count comedy into this equation?
Seinfeld seems to count in a way that Curb Your Enthusiasm doesn't, because Curb Your Enthusiasm, at least initially, was so meta.
Yeah. Painful.
That I think it's almost documentary elements. Mm-hmm. And it's blending of reality and fiction, even though it's clearly all fiction. But those initial...
Yeah. You're right.
All fiction. But I think early on it was confusing enough that people didn't say, this is a regular sitcom. I think it created enough ambiguity about what it was that people don't view it as a Seinfeld or a Cheers.
Right.
Despite the fact that we're now in, season 7 or 8?
Even
maybe more?
I think. Yeah. I mean...
10?
Yeah. I think the mental gymnastics that Larry David has to go through to create something like Curb Your Enthusiasm, to me, is as difficult as the person who's in charge of The Sopranos or The Wire. And I think the stakes are so high with comedy because the demand for a punchline is like this crippling process or this crippling thing to meet. And Curb Your Enthusiasm is so amazingly funny and weird that it just has to be up there with like Lost, I think.
I have no experience in writing for TV, but I agree with your premise that comedy is really hard and unforgiving in a way that drama isn't. Because speaking of Westworld, it's stunningly stupid. The
Wonderfully
characters,
stupid.
Either way, the characters speak in garble, riddles that mean nothing.
I love it.
You can't get away with that in a comedy.
No.
They have to actually be funny.
Yeah.
They have to do funny things.
Yeah.
You can't have someone just mutter things about violent delights of violent ends like once an episode and be like, damn.
Yeah.
Like you can't get away with the movie Drive as a comedy. It's just Ryan Gosling saying nothing.
That was a cool movie. But yeah,
Trash.
What, you thought it was trash? Did you say?
So dumb.
Oh, I enjoyed it, but I like that weird director. He's fine. I mean, he's not my favorite, but Drive was good, man. Well, I also like the chromatics quite a bit. So that long driving scene that everyone loves, I really enjoyed it because I love that song.
I don't know. I tried watching it on a plane. It didn't take.
Oh, watch it again. It's cool. But I watched The New Pope on HBO, and to your point about like the economy of storytelling or just like writing jokes in the moment, that show hinges on the idea that they're so subversive because they're talking about the church in a certain way. But the whole thing is basically, I called it on Twitter, I think, like the right stuff syndrome. It's a lot of these characters walking slowly to cool music. And I'm like, oh, this is almost half the show. And I should be scandalized because of their critique of the church, but I'm not, because whatever. I grew up in New York, not religious and all that stuff. But the heavy lifting that Larry David has to do in 20 minutes versus the new Pope in 45 is exponentially different. And,
I agree.
And not to say Curb Your Enthusiasm doesn't have a distinct style, but the style is like, let's get to it. I don't know.
Well, because Curb Your Enthusiasm, while there are visual gags, is based on a very low budget sort of cinema verite of Larry David in his house or in a car or walking into a coffee shop.
Yeah.
There aren't flying cars.
I wish there were flying cars. Larry David doing a sci-fi show would be something I would definitely watch.
Facts. So, and also last night, just shifting topics abruptly before we get into the Larry David science fiction element, we had the perhaps final Democratic primary debate. This time it was a two-man affair, mano a mano, between
two young bucks going at it.
two kids, between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Do you watch the debate, right?
I did.
And what did you think? Give me your quick take.
I thought it was, before going in, I thought Bernie had to dunk on Biden in order to regain the ground he kind of lost this month. It was a weird time. It was a weird time to have a debate with everything that was happening. And Bernie did awesome, and I really like this guy so much. He made so much sense, but he didn't quite dunk on him. He needed to DeAndre Jordan him, and he didn't. And I thought Biden came out kind of unscathed, and it was exactly according to Biden's team's plans.
I agree with that. I think Biden was probably sharper than people expected because
Yeah, totally.
our expectations had been lowered. He is not a sharp guy. He is not alert a lot of the time.
Come on,
But
he's young enough to be Bernie's son.
But he was relatively coherent and active in the debate.
Yeah, he was
And
prepared.
Just being that was more than a lot of people anticipated. But I am with you on the other part because, you know, the neoliberal idea that Bernie Sanders is a cult of personality is completely untrue. But one thing I would say is that people do love Bernie's compassion and his empathy. And that's what makes his policies formidable, because they are coming from a place that you believe. And you can look at his record for his entire political career, and they are consistent. And he is an empathetic dude. And when he talks about poor people in America, you believe him and you can tell it is real. And I don't think he was able to lower the hammer on Joe Biden because he is that kind of kind, empathetic human. He couldn't smash Joe Biden in the way that he needed to in order to reverse the momentum of this primary.
Yeah, I think there were moments for him to, like, for example, that moment where he asked Joe Biden to name all the super PACs that supported him. And he let that go a little bit. And I think his team probably suggested that he hammer those points home. But my reading of it was like, I mean, I really like Bernie. I always have to preface this because he's so like virtuous, and you're right. Like his thoughts to me are like unfuckwithable. Like he cares about people, and you could see that in the way he has spent his career and the way he talks to you in the moment. I really like this guy, but sometimes I wonder if he was like not as focused as a younger Bernie might be, and falling like trying to follow a plan but not taking cues where they were open to him. And he wasn't maneuvering in a way. He was debating in a straight line. And
yeah, I agree. And I don't know if it's his personality type or his fundamental goodness and generosity as a human, or if he's just older and fuzzier. But I thought that exact moment that you had pinpointed was totally true. You know, Biden had said, "You're supported by super PACs." And Bernie's like, "No, I wasn't." And Bernie's like, "There are 9 of them. I can name them." Or Biden said that. And then Bernie said, "Go ahead and do it." And then he let him off the hook immediately.
Yes.
And to me, that was a huge moment to score points.
Make him think. Make him pause. Yeah.
Well, either say, "Look, I have made avoiding money from super PACs a key component of my campaign for 2 election cycles. If you're going to, accuse me of that dishonestly in front of America and then say you can name them, you have to be able to do it." Yeah. And he did not hold his feet to the fire at all. And it just kept going. And there were a few times like that where Biden would lie flagrantly and Bernie seemed more flabbergasted than upset about it. Yeah. Bernie seems like someone who would say, "Well, Biden, you're taking money from pharmaceutical companies," but he won't say, "You're a sock puppet. You are hollow." He won't turn it into an ad hominem. He says, "Oh, you take money from the insurance agency companies." He doesn't say they own you. Bernie is very forgiving and never turns something into an attack on the person. He always turns it into an attack on the companies themselves or on the vote itself. He will not really attack the man, Joe Biden. And I think he had to leave Joe Biden a smoking crater last night, and he didn't do it.
Yeah, and what I read from that is like, oh, these are 2 lifelong colleagues and politicians. These guys have been at this for decades, man. And they know each other so well, and I don't...
Except that Biden would...
He's a better politician.
Biden was dishonest frequently.
He's a politician, though.
He went and put that bullshit about China and Cuba and attacked Bernie on absolute trash. And Bernie seemed confused that Biden would do that. And it's like, no, this is for the presidency, man. You have to take this guy down.
Right.
And he was just there like, well, what are you talking about? Like, that's bullshit. But
how was Bernie not prepared for that question? That was frustrating. I'm like, he's gonna pin China on you. Have a response. And Bernie was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, yo, these guys are too old. They're just too old.
Bernie never tries to score points. He never sets traps.
Or he wants to. He doesn't have
rhetorical.
Fall.
I don't know that he even wants to. He, as you said, he's so straight line. There's no juking. There's no pump fakes. He's never trying to bait someone into a foul.
He also runs out of talent at the rim, right? Like, this is the story of his career. He's a wonderful politician who has had a lifetime in the Senate, but when it comes to leveling up, like, you see where other politicians have other skill sets.
Absolutely. And we talked about this, over the last couple of weeks, where we talked about his ideas versus the bearer of those ideas and the forces that are aligned against him. And although his ideas are vastly superior to those of the Democratic Party, which has no ideas whatsoever, none. They stand for nothing. They are a husk of a political party that answers only to their corporate overseers. They literally stand for nothing. Bernie is a beacon when it comes to ideas, except that it's being carried by a hobbled, hunched old guy.
Yeah. I mean, this is a tough thing because like his beacon is his own beacon. So when Jahlil Okafor is like, yo, listen, I'm Tim Duncan too. Why can you not see this? I am so ethical. I dunk and rebound. And it's just not, we just don't care about that beacon. And, you know, the people who do care about Jahlil Okafor, the people in his camp are like, why can't the other people see that he is an all-star? And everyone else is like, we're kind of into some other stuff now.
Well, it's the idea of you can be a basketball genius, but you still have to have like typical NBA athleticism or be 7 feet tall. We mock Jokic for being sluggish and goofy.
King, the best point guard in the NBA.
He's 7 feet tall, man.
He's awesome.
You know, like his passing ability, his rebounding, his court vision. That would all be cool if he was 6'5", but he wouldn't be in the NBA.
Right.
His knowledge of the game and understanding of angles and spatial ingenuity, it works because he's 7 feet fucking tall.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a talent.
And that's the thing with Bernie, as we're saying. I think Bernie is politically an anomaly. He's
not a Democrat.
Not in what we consider a modern Democrat. Of course not.
Yeah, I mean, his peers have never considered him a Democrat.
Bernie's ideas are unimpeachable. They are fantastic. They are where we need to go as a country.
My beef is they haven't evolved, and I think AOC and Yang and even sometimes Elizabeth Warren evolved those ideas, and I just want him to change. All he has to do is like add a wrinkle to his game, and he's got legs, but it's almost too late now.
But right, I agree with that. But I disagree about him even adding a wrinkle. Like we're talking about in terms of presentation, maybe. But when it comes down to it, the ideas are what's important. He just isn't a good enough politician himself. He's not 7 feet tall. He can't touch net.
You know what's interesting? Like
he knows what he's doing, but he can't do it.
Every time people hammer him over and over for being like, but Bernie, how would you pay for it? He always says like, go to my website. I'm like, just tell us now. Just do it. Keep on telling us how you're going to pay for it. But he always defers to his website, which I think is like, as someone who wants Bernie to do this, it's frustrating.
Well, the problem also is that it's a fake question.
Yeah, but you have to answer. Like this is a jab.
But he has answered it every single time, and people will never
do it again.
It.
You have to do it. Like this is what politics is, right?
It's true, but it's a bad faith question that every single person will attack him with.
Have a response though. Like
he does though. He does say he says taxes on the rich. I mean, he says it all the time. He says it all the time. He says taxes on the rich all the time.
But what if you cannot tax the rich? Like, what if Senate blocks it? What if the House blocks it? Like, what is the plan? Can you just talk more about it? Talk it through with us in this time. Like, I've read his website. I think it's awesome. I agree with his policy. But, like, you gotta win the people over that aren't me and you, right?
But my thing is, his ideas are obviously superior when they're on a stage.
Not for rich people.
But I'm saying maybe not for rich people when he's talking about taxing them.
Who are very important. Like
But Biden doesn't have any ideas. He doesn't say anything.
But
there's nothing he has. So when you see Biden tweaking his politics to mimic those of sort of the consensus, I understand Bernie's irritation and, of course, an attempt to go back in time and relitigate who was right and who had these ideas first.
But
he's taking his eye off the ball.
Yes.
And I get it. He wants to be like, no, this is not who you are. And I am this guy, and I was always this guy. But like people don't care.
Yes.
And what Bernie needed to stay on was right now and say, Biden, you are an unserious, unfit, like unacceptable politician for this moment.
Yeah.
And that's what coronavirus has shown. That you are all willing to say, oh, okay, now we need universal health care for these things. But if someone has cancer, it's different. Bernie needed to stick right now and say that Biden and you and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are all on this side and you were wrong. And we need to change America and we can unify America because of these ideas. And we need that right now. Instead, he was arguing about the fucking Sandinistas.
it was weird how he went back. He backtracked into Biden's record, which was just Biden running out the clock. And I was like, yo, Biden's got this, man.
No,
Bernie's off the plot.
Bernie needed to stick to right now and be like, you are not the man for this moment, and your ideas are not the ideas for this moment.
Yeah.
And to bring America together in this time of crisis, economic, health.
Go look it up. He voted against
Go
Social
to the YouTube.
Security. Yeah,
Check out the YouTube.
I'm like, yo, Bernie. And like,
Go on Vimeo.
yo, being a politician is a skill, and it's not pretty. And, you know, maybe this is what makes Bernie so charming to me. I mean, not to belittle Bernie, he's a great, great man, or so lovable to me, is that he does not have this skill set, so he kind of remains outside of the discussion of politicians. You know, he's an outsider, and he's branded himself that way, and I think that works, but he needs to actually do the minimum.
Well, look,
in
if
a
you
debate.
had yes, I agree. If you had a shit-eating loser like Pete Buttigieg had
I don't mind
Bernie's politics,
Yeah.
you know, that would be a formidable ass opponent.
Yeah, but
you
then
know-
you would just be DeAndre Jordan, who could shoot free throws, and you'd be a Hall of Famer.
What I mean is, Buttigieg is always out there trying to score points. He just had nothing to stand on because he's a empty vessel.
No,
if
easy.
Buttigieg had had Bernie's politics, but his like debating caginess and trying to set people up and score points, that would be a bad man
But
in
like
a debate.
Bernie left. I mean, I thought the pivotal point last night was Bernie had a layup and he flubbed it. He Corey Brewered it when Biden said he was going to elect a female running mate or appoint a female running mate. And they asked Bernie, would he? And he was like, well, we'll think about it. I'm like, oh my God, you just fucked that up, man. Just say yes and you can backtrack later. But like, you cannot lose to him in this moment because a lot of people care about that question.
It was a horrible bullshit question that should never have been asked.
But
it was trash. It was trash.
But
like,
figure it out. Figure it out, Bernie. Just say
But
yes.
Bernie should not have said yes.
It hurt him, though. I mean, this is why he's not going to be the nominee.
But this is what I'm saying. This is garbage media stuff.
Oh, you
and I
mean
know what you're
just
saying.
politics.
Like he's gonna,
yeah.
but it's just garbage. And this is why it's easy to get disenchanted with our country and our media, because we know who runs all these media companies. It's billionaires. We know this. It's a fact. And when they ask a question that's transparent nonsense,
It's condescending to half the population.
It's a garbage question. And Bernie gave a mediocre answer that was still better than Biden's nonsense. Yes.
No,
I'm gonna have a
Biden-
woman vice president.
No, Biden brought it up. He set Bernie up for
Oh, yeah.
that,
That's
which
true,
was
that's right.
kind of like a move. I'm like, Bernie, don't fall for this move. And I do think it was condescending a little bit. Like, you don't have to claim that. Instead of saying it's going to be a female running mate, say who it is. Like,
But that's what I mean, man. Biden is so deeply unserious. He has no ideas. It's just, here's a pathetic olive branch to identity politics. Here's me shouting out Elizabeth Warren and like Bernie's plans and like a flimsy attempt to like, you know,
he's
to
running out
gain-
the clock. He's winning.
I agree. I'm saying that's what Bernie needed to attack and be like, you were a non-competitive entity in this race. No one likes you. You have no money. You have no ground game. You are a sock puppet for the DNC and its corporate benefactors. You are a loser and you're being propped up. There's no enthusiasm. You have no ground game. And like, he needed to attack him as being a fraudulent ghost ship.
Yeah, people
And he wouldn't do
love
it.
Biden, man. People voted for Biden, man.
They did, but that's okay. You needed to attack him as a charlatan, as a facade of a candidate who represents a bunch of snakes.
Yeah. Also,
And he won't do it because Biden is someone that Bernie probably likes.
and yes, for sure. And Bernie is probably someone Biden likes, but he's like, we're playing to win here.
Yeah, Biden went after Bernie in a way that Bernie did not go after him.
Yeah.
And Bernie needed to because he was the underdog.
Man, it's like, I just don't know if Bernie does not have to be apologetic about anything. He obviously, but like, he just might not get there, and
He didn't want it enough.
or he ran out of talent. You know, like,
He needed a little Mamba mentality,
Yeah.
and he came up with garden snake orthodoxy.
I mean, him turning into the Mamba has its risks as well, because him as an aggressor doesn't wear that well, and I think he should take that risk now because he has no other choice. But I understand why his team might hedge, because it doesn't fit.
But the media is always going to say that he's too aggressive if he criticizes Joe Biden, no matter what. They said it last night.
Yeah.
He went after Biden with absolute kid gloves. He coddled Biden, and the take afterwards was, wow, Bernie really attacked. It was like fending off a protester. Like,
I don't think he was as soft as you frame it, but
I don't think he was either. But he tried hard. He needed a little more gas.
He needed some buckets, man. he
got
no buckets.
No, he got some 12-foot pull-ups.
Yeah.
No dunks.
He back rimmed a couple of dunks. He got rejected at the rim, but the idea was there. They just didn't go down for him.
I don't even think he tried to dunk. I think he was.
He tried to dunk.
I think it was Rip Hamilton out there.
He was like, name the super packs. He's going up for that 360. And it's like, coach.
So speaking of the NBA, the latest out is that the season might start in June or July, and it looks like at this point the regular season is done.
Sad. I hate it.
How do you feel about that? I know you were mourning the chance to tank, and now you may not ever see that happen.
Well, I'm mad because I'm frustrated because, as we talked last week, you were all excited for a little wrinkle, a little technicality that would get the Oklahoma City pick to Philly. You were just like gobbling them up like little fava beans. And then you turn around
Shut it down.
And then you mock me for wanting the lottery process to simulate like it always does. You said, no, let's throw this all away as long as the Sixers get that damn pick.
That's true. I was thinking about this after the show and actually laughing about you.
Sounds
about like everyone being like, I can't believe the season's shut down. And you, they're like, no, we won't get a chance to see the tanking play out. I'm like, my quote is so weird.
No,
I was like, there are like 1% of 1,000. I don't even know how we're doing the math here, but I was like, there is like no one on earth who's like, we gotta let this tanking play out right so teams can intentionally lose, except for you, and I love it.
As somebody who stands for Sam Hinkie as much as you do, I'm shocked and appalled because my team, my interest here is the New York Knicks. I love them more than any other team in the league, even though they're not in the league. Correction, my bad on that. But I want them to get back into the NBA, and we had certain things looking up. I really like a few players in this draft. Anyway, we won a couple games, and I was frustrated, and I wanted them to have a chance at getting a top 3 player in this draft. And for the probability of that to vanish on us, because my interest is the New York Knicks, was frustrating, and I accept those terms, but they didn't have a chance. Just there's like a 1-game difference between like 4 teams for these lottery balls. I believe in probability. I believe in trying to get a superstar in the draft would change everything. And these are these minor moments that nobody pays attention to that will saddle this team in losses moving forward.
I understand all of those things you're describing. I also think this idea that like we have to let these teams tank to sort it out is like, well, that's what they've been doing all along.
Wow, you are such a results guy now. Rest in peace, the process, man.
No, what I mean is, are we saying that Detroit,
yes, we
and
are
Atlanta and Minnesota are gonna win a bunch of games over the the next 20?
There's a game within the game, man.
Again, I love that you care about this. Mm-hmm. My point was how few people's concern was letting the tanking play out.
Well, like the people who don't care would say Dolan is the problem. And I would kind of agree, but the fact that we haven't gotten a good player in the draft is the problem. And we probably won't get one this year again.
But due to the leveling effects of the new lottery system, the difference between the Knicks getting a top 4 pick at 37% right now and, say, Minnesota, who has this, or Cleveland, who is the second, or Golden State, the worst record by far, is 52%.
That's a huge difference. Huge.
37 to 52 is not enormous.
I would not take those odds on like a $200 bet. Like, that is a completely different thing. And this is the misunderstanding of 2016, right? Being like, what a comeback. What an unexpected result. And I'm like, people who work with probability and numbers were like, no, that's a pretty high probability. That's a big difference.
We know what the difference is. It's 52 versus 37.
Huge. It's huge. That difference is a difference between John Morant and RJ Barrett.
Well, no.
In a vacuum, yeah. I mean, the chances at that, you want every chance for success.
I know how the lottery works. I'm saying it is now flattened in a way that is different from in the past.
I mean, it sounds like,
for example, if the Knicks...
You don't have to explain this. We get it. But
you're
standing for mid-range jumpers now. Now you're just like, well, mid-range still gets you 2 points, and the percentage is a little bit lower or higher. Might as well walk away with 2 instead of 0.
But no one's arguing there isn't a difference between 37 and 52.
I thought you were just arguing that.
We know there's a difference. We know exactly what it is. It's 37 to 52. We know what it is.
Huge. And I wanted the Knicks to have every opportunity to succeed, and it is what it is. I accept these terms because the world is strange, but I'm like, well, I would have liked to see this play out.
Again, it is an extremely outlier opinion.
You don't really know many Knicks fans, though.
This is my issue with the season being canceled, that I think the Knicks, if they somehow lost games more than the other teams who are attempting to lose, could pick up, say, probably tops
a few ping pong balls.
I
love it. I mean, again, my interest
and
is
again, I love this about
team.
you. I love this about you, Andrew Kuo. But I was literally in my kitchen, probably making something with fava beans, cackling about what you were bemoaning about our missed season.
Well, if an election was cut short, sort of like what happened in Florida with W, that just doesn't feel great.
I know, but you're not talking about a team making the playoffs. You're talking about just teams filtering to the bottom. There isn't even a real tanking thing. The Knicks aren't even tanking. The Knicks were still playing older dudes. If anything, the Knicks would lose ping pong balls.
This is my frustration. They lost a lot of ping pong balls right at the end. And,
they won 4 of the last 10 games.
Yeah. So this is my frustration. I was like, I wanted to see this play out for the mean to balance, because they're not that good. They're going to lose more games than that. But
I don't know, man. They just wanted it more.
Or maybe not. But it's interesting that you really hang your hat on Ben Simmons. How did the Philly 76ers get Joel Embiid? We're not valuing the draft anymore? What?
Of course we are. The flattened odds make a big difference, though.
But you still have to, not
all right, we can't do this again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you brought it up.
I know I did. That's my fault. I apologize to listeners. It was more that I just was like, that is amazing.
And you've turned into a ring counter.
That is amazing. Out of all the things that Kuo is upset about.
How's that amazing? It's the team I care most about. Right? Obviously, I go to Knicks first.
I know. Again, this is my fault. I apologize to everyone for bringing this up.
Wow. Just a
huge mistake on my part.
It's like you're potting in a straight line like Bernie Sanders. You need to
Anyway, so you're going to get 37% of the ping pong balls, or a 37% chance of a top 4 pick.
Hopefully we get Halliburton. That'll be fine. I'm into that.
So the season as it stands right now is potentially going to end in July. Everything gets pushed back. The next season would start in December. And they're talking about everything being 82 games. I sort of thought that this might be an impetus towards pushing for, a 68-game season or something like that. But it looks like they want to do everything as is, which is a bit surprising. I also think all of these potential dates, are completely arbitrary at this point.
Yeah. I mean,
The New York City schools, they're like, well, the closest it's going to open up is like April 20th. I'm like, you just pick that because it's 420? Why not June 9th?
I think, yeah, it's tough to tell it might not be tough to tell what's going to happen if we see Italy kind of doing exactly what we're going to do, but a few weeks ahead of time. So that's a dark projection, but this thing should level off. I really like New York City and LA shutting down for the time being with many concerns, but I think the NBA can kind of plan around that. But you're right. We'll see what happens moving forward. I do think there's going to be an exhaustion of this kind of life and a social push towards resuming.
I agree. In this interim, we talked last week about the discovery and unearthing of the fact that old basketball is generally unwatchable. And I've seen a few pods are trying to kind of go back and relive series from the past, or people just watching old games. And I believe those are going to be broadcast on various NBA channels, etc. They're all on YouTube if you want them for the most part. Have you dabbled into that pool of nostalgia wearing your whist wetsuit?
Checked out some Kobe Shaq finals games a little bit. Those hot games of smart basketball, whipping passes around, high percentage shots. Nah, man, those games are terrible. They're hard to watch. It's a bunch of guys clogging the lane and like Kobe doing spin moves and getting swept by the Spurs.
Specifically, what have you been watching from the Kobe Shaq Lakers? Because that era started when Shaq went to the Lakers. I believe it was in a sign and trade, or he's a free agent. I forget
97.
exactly how it worked.
Yeah.
I think that was for the 97 season, and Kobe was drafted and traded to the Lakers.
The
by
inaugural
Charlotte
draft
Hornets.
of the NBA.
1996. So their first season together was 97.
Are you okay? Do you need a drink of water? Are you getting choked? Are you getting wistful about Kobe and Shaq?
Or am I getting Rona? Who can say?
Quarantine, baby. Kobe and Shaq kind of started together in 97. And they had a long run together. It ended up being 8 years together, 97 to 04.
And we're talking about a three-peat. They were a dynasty.
Huge. And in the minds of NBA lore, maybe one of the best teams of all time. And if you're counting rings, now that we're counting rings all of a sudden, yeah, the proof is there. They won a back-to-back-to-back. 01, and 02 against Reggie Miller and the Pacers, Aaron McKee and the 76ers, and the Nets. Oh, Jason Kidd was pretty good. I'm a big Kidd fan.
The Kerry Kittles led Nets.
Yeah, Kmart manning the paint. 2 number 1 picks, Kidd and Kmart. Both Knicks legends, by the way, where they actually played their best ball. But the perception of... So I've been revisiting this take by the interns maybe a month ago, that when the Milwaukee Bucks were rolling before they went into self-care and quarantine, they were statistically one of the best teams of all time. And I started comparing them to what we perceive to be the best teams of all time, like the Pippen Jordan Bulls, these Lakers, the Pau Gasol Kobe Lakers, Bill Russell, Tommy Heinsohn, all these repeat teams, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker. The Bucks just crushed them. And I think what we talk about all the time repeatedly on this pod is the difference between influence and how good something is, and what time does to evolution of the game and our perception of how good a team was. And I went back and watched some of these Kobe Shaq games, and they were good. I remember them at that level, but they would not be able to beat the Rockets, the 2020 Rockets.
It's a hot take, and I like it, respect it.
The Rockets are good, man.
A few of those Kobe Shaq teams were exceptionally good.
Was it
They were-
01
it-
was their best, the Sixers finals?
Yeah, that one year they were phenomenally good.
Yeah.
You know, they were an elite offense and elite defense. They won tons and tons of games. They stomped through the entire postseason, losing only one game to the Philadelphia 76ers with Iverson's classic step over on Tyronn Lue. That was their only postseason loss. That team was incredibly good. Look, I believe in the time machine, approach. You put them in a time machine, it opens its doors, they step onto an NBA court, they get waxed by everybody. Despite how good, historically great Kobe and Shaq were, or that team was. The game has evolved too much for a team from 20 years ago, let alone 10, to compete.
Yeah, but when you remove them in that time machine and they don't have an influence, we don't know what the butterfly effect would be. So their influence is huge.
Those are all true points, but that's even more complicated. That's like a Westworld episode.
Some Back to the Future stuff. That's some hoverboard-ish.
Like as Kobe starts playing, DeMar DeRozan starts like disappearing.
Right, as
Jason Tatum goes into a spin move and just vanishes.
I'm trying to catch up to this joke, but my head is spinning a little bit. Yeah, R.J. Barrett, his hollow jersey just drops to the court with no
His
soul.
nickname, the word Mamba, just starts vanishing.
Or Jason Tatum becomes like the best player ever.
But one thing that's interesting about that Lakers team is we can look at their pinnacle as one of the greatest teams of all time. And it's kind of like when you look at a graph over time and as you start pulling out and fading away, all the other small little steps start sort of disappearing into nothingness. And you just see that peak. Because this was a team that, as you mentioned, was together for 8 seasons. They lost in the Western Conference semifinals 3 times.
They got sweet.
Which is kind of like an indictment of a team, right?
Yeah.
Like you lost 3 times in the semis. And in their case, they lost 3 times with a combined record of 3-12.
Yeah.
They got annihilated.
Yeah. If we do
And we don't view that team, Kobe and Shaq, as one that got smoked in the second round of the playoffs 3 times.
Yeah. And if we do the transitive property thing, like that boxer that in the boxing world you have to do because there's not enough fights. If I told you these 2020 Bucks would probably handle the Spurs, the 99 Spurs or 98 Jazz, you'd probably be like, oh yeah, I think they'd beat them. The 98 Jazz swept Kobe and Shaq. The 99 Spurs swept Kobe and Shaq. You know, like we only have
They
the
got
results
one
we
against.
have.
They got one against Utah.
That was 97, I believe, in the semis, 4-1. In the Western Conference Finals in 98, I believe the Jazz swept them.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
The 03 Spurs swept, 4-2 in the semis. And the 04 Pistons, kind of in the prime of Kobe's career, gentlemen's sweep, 4-1 in the finals.
And that was a team that had Peyton and Malone on it. And the Lakers fans lament after that series was, well, Malone was hurt. I'm like, that's what we're hanging this loss on?
Yeah.
Karl Malone
Yeah.
was hurt? The ring-chasing mailman? A postman? Not Kobe and Shaq in their prime. It's the postman. That's whose fault this was?
Yeah, 04 was prime Kobe, man. And, yeah, right. So if I say, I think the 2020 Houston Rockets, small ball, would beat the Pistons with Tayshaun Prince and Rasheed Wallace and Mr. Big Shot, you'd be like, yeah, that's plausible. But not the Lakers, not
Right.
Shaq and Kobe. I'm like, oh, I mean, yeah, you just love those teams, you know? Like, everyone loves what they love, and memory doesn't serve you right. But now in the age of Corona, we're coming for those receipts, baby.
Well, a good example would be the Dallas Mavericks team that won a title. If you said, do you think the Milwaukee Bucks could beat that team? You'd be like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That team's not scary. Dirk was great. Put Giannis on him. Okay, cool. Series over.
Yeah.
Could they beat the Heatles? He'd be like, hell no.
No.
Not a chance.
LeBron, get out of here. Ray Allen,
Prime Bosch.
Dwayne Wade, D Wade. No. Yo, how lovable is Dirk? I know your thing with Dirk, but did you see that footage of Darren Williams? Also, shout out to Darren Williams, who seems to be living his best life.
Still getting paid.
Yeah, is he?
Yeah, the Nets, I believe the Nets still have him on payroll.
Is it injury?
Someone is still paying him.
Is it injury, or do people just not like him? Because he's notoriously ushered Jerry Sloan out the door in Utah. A Utah legend, Jerry Sloan. The in charge of the precinct over there in Salt Lake City. But is Darren Williams out of the league because he's not fun to be around?
Are you talking about the jazz duo Twinfection? I didn't make that up.
What do we call the jazz duo, Gobert and Mitchell Robinson? I came up with Flu Lives Matter. Is there a better one, though?
That and Twinfection were the funniest to me.
Oh, yo, man, they got stuff to work out, man. Internal affairs over there. Oh, but
Darren Williams is making rounding up $5.5 million from the Brooklyn Nets this season.
Shout out to Darren Williams, who was an awesome basketball player who should have signed that contract, man. He was worth that money.
He is not a businessman. He is a business man.
Yo, when he was in his prime, I had a lot of homies have to admit to me, because my whole theory was people just didn't like his hair or the way he looked. Because, like, I was kind of into his rotund, his round vibe, his RFD.
When he was in Illinois, he was borderline dancing bear.
Yeah, dude, he was so good. And but a lot of my homies admitted they just thought his hair was disgusting looking. It was just like not an easy pill to swallow.
The Trae Young effect.
I like Trae's hair, man. It's awesome. I just really like Trae Young, I think. I've really turned around on him.
I was talking to this dude, nice guy, and he was like, yeah, I've got some connections to NBA players. And we're
Already
chatting.
funny.
And I was like, yeah, cool. No. Again, he knew people. He was involved in NBA business in various ways. He was like, yeah, like my friend, he's Trae Young's barber. I was like, no disrespect to anyone, but just a wild statement to bring up.
So it was like, oh yeah, my homie games with Gordon Hayward. Like, yes. Trae Young's barber.
My man's Jokic's dietitian.
Is there anything better? Like, oh, my man's Robert Swift's tattoo guy. It's like, what?
I loved it though. He's like Trae Young's barber, huh?
I
I believe Trae Young's barber is great, because who knows what it would look like without this man's craftsmanship.
True. I mean, does Trae Young's barber do a better job than LeBron James's Propecia guy? Like, LeBron James has his hairline back, man. It's back, baby.
Look, these guys are talented. They're amongst the best in the world at what they do.
Right, that's why they get paid the big bucks. Yo, LeBron James's hairline guy is still getting paid.
King shit.
I mean, Carlos Boozer's guy. I'm the guy. I'm Carlos Boozer's barber. Like,
I'm Carlos Boozer's Beijing expert.
Amazing. Yeah, I went back into a deep dive and looked up these pictures of like Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash. Yo, Steve Nash's style is wild, man. He had some vibes on him. I mean, I know this was like the peak of hipster era, but
I was about to say, let's be fair.
Oh,
the mid 2000s were crazy.
Crazy. Just wild, man.
You want to wear a billowy pink shirt? Go off.
Go off, king.
Like jeans, distressed, tight, huge, like whatever, man. It was too much freedom.
Whoa, they had too much power? They couldn't handle prosperity?
You want a newsboy cap? Yeah. Cool. Put it with a goatee.
Yo, try to put a feather in your fedora. See how that goes. Nice.
You like peacocking? First, you meet a woman. You neg her.
Yeah. Yo, just walk into the arena with a stapler. Trust me. Walk into the arena with a balloon. The rest will fall into place.
I mean, everyone was confused.
It was a confusing
No
time.
one knew what was going on.
Yo, we survived Y2K. The world was our oyster. All the fedoras were legit at that point. All the the extra baggy pants, relax fit. Yo, we survived.
And
Y2K.
honestly, you know, at that point, V-neck technology had reached new depths. We
Yeah.
had no idea
The-
that V-necks could actually go that low. It took many years to develop an American Apparel V-neck that could almost get to your navel.
I feel like PJ Tucker still rocks that look.
Is he still listening to Spank Rock?
Hollertronics. He's a strictly Hollertronics, man.
Just walking into the tunnel with Amanda Blank playing in his earbuds.
Some Be More House. Just like hyping him up before a game.
What a time.
Some Rod Lee. Yeah, what does PJ Tucker listen to, do you think?
I hope he is listening to Rod Lee and he's dancing the pain away.
He's dancing the paint away.
Yeah, that's what I liked about Uncut Gems was like darting into like 2012. It's like screw like the 90s, the 80s. I'm over that. Like let's dive into the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
Let's go early aughts.
You know I love Uncut Gems and the Safdie Bros, Cookie Soup's classic, Alara Pictures, Legends. But I watched Buffalo 66 again. I believe we talked about it a couple of days ago. The last time I'll see you in real life for 4 months, I think. But we talked about Buffalo 66 because it's not far from where the old stomping grounds of young Benny Buckets from Rochester. And that movie is incredible. And there's so many echoes to Good Time. Actually, at some point, he says, like, in a bowling alley, it's like, have a good time. I'm like, is that a direct Safdie? Like, the Safdies directly reference that movie? I'll never know. But there's so many overlapping themes, and obviously Good Time is an amazing movie, even maybe better than Uncut Gems, if we're ranking. And but I feel like the only thing missing from Buffalo 66 was, like, an amazing soundtrack. So if you put, like, Nicolas Jarre, like, over it for the entire movie, it might be just like the hottest movie in 2020.
Being in upstate New York at a very young age and seeing the Bills go to 4 consecutive Super Bowls and lose each of them, I will not say that the civic depression and spirit was unaccurately displayed in that movie.
Well, we were talking.
It was traumatic if you were a Bills fan. And I was not a Bills fan, so I didn't really care. But it was traumatic if you were.
Traumatic.
Because at that point, everyone was wearing like Bills Zubaz and starter jackets. And like they were everywhere. You'd go to the mall and everyone was wearing Bills stuff. Like whole families. And people would drive like to Buffalo and it's an hour and change. And like a third of the people who went to games were probably from Rochester. So it was both cities really were the patrons for the Buffalo Bills. The local newspaper only talked about the Bills.
Because all you guys had were the Sabres and Bills, right?
That's it. And then Syracuse Orange Run. So when they lost 4 in a row, it was just this battering of cities that were also crumbling at the same time in terms of
Oh my God, economic.
losing
stuff.
population, losing jobs, and it was
Harrowing.
It was a full beatdown, man.
It was a full beatdown. At least you had amazing sunny weather and like it was warm enough so you guys could enjoy the.
I barely remember it. I was on the beach.
That's
You
right.
know, Lake Ontario shores.
Yeah. We had to wear those fedoras to protect us from the sun. But yeah, the Bulls were incredible, and I think history kind of is kind to them because we've all gotten smarter and we all realize what an accomplishment losing 4 Super Bowls is. That's just unprecedented that you guys were there for 4 coin flips and it just didn't come up heads. And
But this is something that we discuss a lot, where the conventional sports wisdom is that there's one champion and everyone else is a loser.
Yeah.
Because your last game ended in a loss if you were in the playoffs. And like that's just not true. If you were a draft bust but went number 1 overall, that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
You were the first pick in the NBA draft. That was your dream, and you did it.
Yeah. Darren Williams is so washed up, and what a loser. I'm like, no, he was on top of he represented our country in the Olympics. The dude was incredible.
He was like a top 10-ish player on the planet for a couple of years.
Yeah. It's like, LOL, Darren Williams. I'm like, what?
Yeah, his hair was bad. He was really, really good at basketball.
Yeah. He was on top of this mountain. But like the way people frame losing is so interesting. Like, can the Knicks beat the best team in the NCAA? I'm like, in a hot second. That team is full of the best players you'll ever see in any court other than the NBA. Like, RJ Barrett is incredible. He has nothing to prove in life. He might not be an all-star ever. He's a centrist, probably. But shout out to RJ Barrett.
I do find the meritocracy of the NBA very reassuring. Because when you look at that bell curve of ability, even we look at it from a personal standpoint, like, oh, I'm pretty good at ball, and I'm so far. I'm on like the other side of the street when it starts getting really narrow.
Right.
And then you keep going, and there's like LeBron, he's like winking in the distance, waving at you.
I know.
Oh, look, there's Bron.
Yeah.
He's like 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
And you have to be so good to get to that level. And then when we're talking about things like art or politics or business or music, meritocracy is very foreign to those, or is at least arbitrary, arguable. It's a matter of opinion.
It's flattened.
And sports is very pure in that regard.
Yeah.
There's no one who's just in the NBA despite sucking.
Yeah.
That guy doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, we always talk about this in terms of Carmelo. We've heard firsthand accounts of amazing ball players. And, you know, we mock Carmelo for playing a certain way and maybe not being as modern as he used to be, maybe having RFD, round face disease. And then he steps on the court and everyone on the court is like, oh, he's the alpha dog. He's the one, you know? So all these ballers are like, oh, we don't mess with Carmelo Anthony. He's the guy. And some fans are just like, LOL. It's a whole different experience and a whole different structure.
The closest thing we have to the sort of silver spoon, environment that kind of dictates business, politics, and so much of our life and what qualifies as success is like someone like, say, Austin Rivers, who
#1 high school player in the country.
Right, and he went to Duke, and he went and became a lottery pick, and he didn't really live up to that expectation. And he had to scrape and fight to stay in the league. He's not on the team with his dad anymore, and he worked himself into being a mediocre rotational player on a good team. And if he wasn't that, he'd be out of the league.
Yeah.
If there was no security net after you're drafted, after you've gone to college, he had to make it on his own terms, and it didn't matter that his dad was Doc Rivers. Mm-hmm. If he couldn't have stuck around and become a guy who can be a secondary ball handler, shoot a bit, play a little defense, he would be playing in Europe.
With Anthony Randolph. And yeah, totally. I think of JJ Redick a little bit. He was on his way out of the league, and he just tricked people into thinking he was like a tenacious defender. Be like, oh, he's really evolved. But he had to do what he had to do to stay in the league. And I sometimes I wonder about if Jahlil Okafor was here, he might be like, I'm going to the bar. Forget this social distancing stuff. I'm like, no. You're good. Just be smart. I was like, nah, I want to get these buckets, man. I'm like,
Without delving into a totally different conversation, the shifting of the game also plays a huge role in those fringy players' success in a way that they can't control a lot of the time.
Totally.
PJ Tucker is a good example of someone who was on that bleeding edge of being in the NBA. He played in Europe. He played overseas, many places. But the game changed that allowed someone with his defensive skill set and body type who could guard larger post players and could stick threes, could be a makeshift starting center. And that would not have been possible 5 years ago or 10 years ago. There happened to be a couple teams who were willing to utilize him in a progressive and futuristic way. If those teams didn't exist, he might not be in the NBA.
Absolutely. And it goes so fast season to season, where Reggie Bullock is valuable one year and kind of a bit player in relegation in another. And I think of Amon Shumpert quite a bit because, you know, he has a limited skill set, but when we all thought 3-and-D was it, teams were adding him to their roster for that role for a split second because he's still young enough to contribute, still in shape, still what he is, but now you need a little more than 3-and-D, and he doesn't really provide that, so he's currently not on a team.
And when you mentioned Redick, there was a bit of a conventional wisdom that he had improved as a defender enough to stay on the court. Maybe he improved as a defender a bit as he got older and stronger, etc. But the real reason that Redick became a valuable player was that threes became emphasized in the NBA offense. Mm-hmm. And he happened to be one of the best three-point shooters on the planet. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that he became a more complete player. Right, he got better at dribbling. Right. He got better at defense. That wasn't it.
Right.
His skill set became incredibly valuable. And then as other people have developed that skill set, it's become less important.
The goalpost shifted towards him and away from others, for sure.
And then now, when we understand as a basketball society that you need to have spacing and you need to have shooters, and everyone starts developing that skill set, he is less of an outlier than he was. He's still an anomaly. He's a great, great shooter. But his liabilities now matter more.
100%. And
because you can get PJ Tucker, who can also guard centers, to knock down some threes too.
Right. I mean, Redick has the benefit of being your traditional shooter that you have in your mind. I don't know if that involves... Well, what's the similarity he has between, like, Kyle Korver, Adam Morrison, TJ McConnell,
Mike
Dunleavy.
They all went to Duke.
Oh, right. Totally. I saw Cherokee Parks on the street the other day, man.
How's he doing?
I did not talk to him, but I was walking on 14th Street before the age of Rona. And I was like, who is this very tall dude? I bet he's a baller. And I kind of picked up my pace and walked up to him. It was Cherokee Parks, man. He was thin as a rail, but healthy thin. But he was very lanky and very tall and very dookie.
A long time ago, I think I was at a party in the basement of the Rivington Hotel. I'm not sure what it was called at that point. It might have been called the Rivington Hotel. Mm. But I remember chatting with a very tall woman, and it was his sister.
Did she play at college?
I don't know. We just chatted for a little while, and then she said something about how her brother was in the NBA. And I was like, who's your brother? And she said Cherokee Parks. And she was probably like 6'2" or 6'3".
You're talking about Corey Parks.
Maybe so.
She was in a band called Nashville P-word I cannot say.
What's the
this
P-word?
True? It's like it's a female body part.
Oh,
wow. Wait, she was in this band? No, get out of here.
You know, I think we're running on fumes right now. Kuo is self-editing. He is taking curse words and swears, and he is socially distancing himself from such naughtiness. References to genitalia.
She was in that band. She was their first bassist. Wow.
And what was the band called again?
Nashville P-word.
It's been another enthralling episode of Coronaville Cookies.
Sea dogs. We're all sea dogs.
Cookies.
Cookies.